This is the Spycraft 101 podcast. Welcome to your clandestine classroom. This is episode number 199 of the Spycraft 101 podcast. Today, we're going back into the archives again for what I consider to be one of our greatest hits. Now that the podcast has been running for more than 4 years, I know that there are a lot of episodes that some of my newer listeners may have missed. So I wanted to reintroduce you to the incredible story of Toby Scott and Jerry Daniels. Randolph Toby Scott is a former smoke jumper with the U.S. Forest Service who later worked in Southeast Asia under contract with Continental Air Services during the secret war in Laos. He also took part in Operation Coldfeet in the Arctic Circle, one of the most daring and ambitious missions of the Cold War. Toby was right in the middle of some incredible events over the years, and he's got a lot to share, in particular about his very good friend, Jerry Daniels. Jerry was a smoke jumper and Continental Air Services employee as well, who was later recruited by the CIA to become a case officer himself. Jerry spent nearly 20 years altogether in Southeast Asia until 1982, when he suffered a tragic and mysterious fate that continued to raise many questions for the next 35 years. This episode first debuted back in September 2022 as episode number 60. Afterwards, my friend and two-time podcast guest Lee Gossett, who also flew with Continental Air Services in Laos, emailed me to say he'd listened to this episode and he thought that Toby probably shared details about Operation Coldfeet which have never before been made public anywhere else. As you can probably imagine, for me, that was pretty much the best possible feedback I could ever hope for. I've stayed in touch with Toby since then, and I hope to have him back on the podcast again after this to share even more stories. But in the meantime, get ready for one of the most amazing and memorable episodes I've ever recorded. But before we get into this story, you should know that OC Strategic Academy is here to teach you how to transform your career with the skill of a spy. With OC Strategic Academy, you can learn to understand people on a deeper level, influence decisions and build connections, and gain the edge you've been missing in work, in life, and in every interaction. Each course has been developed by a former war reporter turned human intelligence collector with extensive experience in the Middle East. The courses include Negotiate Like a Spy and Network Like a Spy, plus several others. There's also a private one-on-one coaching opportunity available if you're interested in training that is tailored directly to your needs. You can find them at academy.ocstrategic.com and use the discount code SPYCRAFT101 to get 10% off any course you decide is right for you. Click the link in the show notes of this episode to level up your human intelligence skills. With me right now is Randolph Toby Scott, a former smoke jumper with the U.S. Forest Service, who later worked in Southeast Asia under contract with Continental Air Services during the secret war in Laos. He also took part in Operation Coldfeet in the Arctic Circle, one of the most daring and ambitious missions of the Cold War. Toby was right in the middle of some incredible events over the years, and he's got a lot to share. I was able to get in contact with him after I learned the incredible story of one of Toby's close friends, Jerry Daniels. Jerry was also a smoke jumper and Continental Air Services employee as well, and was later recruited by the CIA to become a case officer himself. Jerry spent nearly 20 years altogether in Southeast Asia until 1982, when he suffered a tragic and mysterious fate that continued to raise many questions for the next 35 years. I invited Toby on today so we could talk about his experiences with Continental Air Services and his memories of Jerry Daniels and the enduring mystery of his life and death. But first, I want to say a big thank you to everyone listening who is also supporting me on Patreon, including Christian C. and Sean B. Your monthly contributions there help me keep this podcast going week in and week out. As a way of thanking my patrons, I offer a lot of great freebies and promotions, including free and discounted books and products from the Spycraft 101 store. Patrons also get exclusive access to long-form articles of mine that aren't available anywhere else. If you haven't signed up for my Patreon yet, but you want to, just click the link in the show notes or on whatever podcast platform you're listening to right now. Toby, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
You betcha.
So I know we've already talked a bit in setting up this interview now, so I've got a pretty good idea of things, but I'm sure that I have a lot of people who are listening who are not really sure what I'm talking about when I say smoke jumper. So can you tell me what a smoke jumper is exactly?
Yeah, they hire a bunch of guys. You got to be in good shape and certain weight and all that. But they hire a bunch of guys every year, and what you do is you train for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then you start doing your practice jumps, and they drop you on fires back in the wilderness. And you put those fires out, and then in the old days, we always packed out. Now they pick them up with helicopters. It's kind of strange because they don't use them hardly anymore. They let the fires burn, and all of us old timers, we don't understand that.
I didn't realize that. I didn't know too much about modern smoke jumping. Everything that I know before I got in contact with you, honestly, came from Lee Gossett, who I know that you know, and who was my guest for episode 13 of this podcast for anyone who hasn't heard it already.
Yeah. So Lee's an old jumper and a pilot too. Good pilot.
Oh yeah. He's a wonderful guy. I've stayed in touch with him for over a year now, ever since I first interviewed him, and I can't say enough good things about him, honestly. So how did you yourself become a smoke jumper? What made you want to do that in the first place?
Well, I was raised on a little ranch in central Texas. The little town where I grew up was called Nix, N-I-X. And it was, all they had there was a store and a church and a 3-room school.
Wow.
That's where I grew up. And so I was pretty naive when I went after the 7th grade, we had to go into town, and Lampasas was the town, about 3,500 people. And we went to school there till we got out of high school. And when I got out of high school, while I was in high school, I heard the stories about some of the guys who were going up to work in Idaho in the summers. And when I was a freshman in high school, I took agriculture. Every year, the ag class would go on a trip for 2 weeks up into the northwest up there. And you'd take a bedroll and some cooking utensils, and we'd just camp along the road. And we went to New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, Idaho, Utah, maybe Nevada. And that was the first time I'd ever been over 100 miles from my house. I really liked those mountains and those pine trees. And when I got out of high school, there were 4 of us got in this old beat up Chevy, barely running. And we headed for Idaho the day after we got our high school diplomas. And I had $72. That was my life savings. And we took off. I didn't even have a job. One of the guys had a job, but the other 3 didn't. And we got all the way up to McCall, Idaho. And one of the guys going up with us was going to be a smoke jumper that year. So we stopped at McCall and let him off. And at the same time, we saw Johnny Lewis and Daryl Eubanks, and they were smoke jumpers there already. They'd jumped 2 or 3 years already. And we talked to them. And then I went on up to New Meadows, which was 10 miles north of McCall, and went to the ranger station. And I got hired there to pile brush that summer. And after a logging operation. And it's the first time I'd ever seen a chainsaw.
Oh, wow.
But I knew how to use an axe, and they liked that because most of those guys couldn't do much axe work. But anyway, about a week after I started piling brush, the ranger came out there one day, and I think there were 5 of us. And he said, I've got the money appropriated to train 2 lookouts. We're going to man 2 lookouts this summer. Does anybody want to go on the lookout? And I was the first one with my hand up. So I went to fire school for 2 weeks and learned how to use a fire finder and use the radios and how to look for fires, and got familiar with the binoculars and all that. So they packed me up with a bunch of food and stuff, and we had to go in 17 miles with horses and mules to put me on that lookout.
Wow.
I spent 2 months up there. Saw 2 people in 2 months, a sheep herder and a packer.
Oh, my gosh.
I was 18 years old, and I started me a batch of sourdough, so I'd cook sourdough biscuits every day and sourdough hotcakes. And I had a 22, and you weren't supposed to probably, but I'd kill a grouse once in a while. I had to pack my water about 1.5 miles uphill to the lookout, so it taught me to be real careful with water. And about all I did all summer was paint, and because the lookout hadn't been manned since the 40s. And when I went inside, they still had a poster on the wall that says, "Help win the war, prevent forest fires." And I used that to start my fire with. So I wish I'd have kept that. But anyway, I only turned in 2 fires all summer, and both of them were smoke jumper fires because I was I couldn't see a building or a road from my lookout. I was back in the Salmon River wild country, and both fires they jumped on, and so I got to see the smoke jumpers come out and put the fires out, but I didn't see them after the fire. So after that summer was over, I actually got me a hunting license and bought me an old 30-40 Craig, and I went elk hunting, and I killed me a big old bull elk first day of the season. And I had a lot of meat there. I gave most of it away. But that winter, I worked on a ranch in Texas, and I put my application in with the smoke jumpers, and I'll be darned if I didn't get accepted. And they were pretty picky. I was lucky because that year they told us there were over 300 applications, and they only hired 21 people. And 2 of them flunked out. They didn't make it. But it was pretty tough training, so it was quite an honor to be picked,
Yeah, I can imagine.
I jumped 2 years in McCall and 2 years in Idaho City, which was a kind of a satellite jump base out of McCall. We'd train in McCall and then go down there. Had 20 people that stay in Idaho City. I think I only jumped 4 years. I jumped 2 years in McCall, 2 years in Idaho City. And after my 4th year, I got a draft notice that I was about to be drafted. So I went and I'd already signed up with a Marine Corps Reserve outfit in Boise. And I'd already taken my physical at the Naval Hospital and everything. They called me and says, "Hey, we can't take you." And I said, "My God, I'm about to get drafted, and I don't want to spend 2 years in here. I won't be able to jump next year." The way it turned out, I wound up going into a National Guard outfit out of Boise. And I went and spent my boot camp training at Fort Ord, California, and then went to a ordnance school in Aberdeen, Maryland for my training, MOS training. While I was in the Army, I found out my dad had gotten stomach cancer, and he died just before I got out of the Army.
Oh my gosh.
And he hadn't even been sick. He didn't last long. So I had my mother and my younger brother were still there in Texas, and my younger brother was only 14. So I didn't jump that summer. I stayed home there and worked on that ranch and helped my mother and my older brother get kind of sorted out. And then I went to school that fall at Texas A&M. I'd already spent 1 year at A&M. And that fall, I checked in again, and I was a night clerk in the Western Motel there in College Station. And back then, my parents didn't have any money, so I had to work while I was and save my money in the summer to go to school. And back then, they didn't have any bank loans for students. You either had the money to go to school or you didn't. When you registered, if you couldn't pay for the hours you were taking, you couldn't register. So anyway, I stayed off campus in a little old tiny apartment deal with another guy, and worked in the motel. And of course, I was about flat broke at the end of the semester, and I got this phone call it was Ken Smith, who had been the second in charge there at Idaho City. And he asked me if I might be interested in going to work for the same outfit that Johnny and Daryl had worked for. And of course, Johnny and Daryl, this was in January of 62. And in August of 61, Johnny and Daryl had been on that first plane crash in Laos, the first fatalities, and they got killed in that same airplane.
Oh, wow. You were already aware that they had passed away, and then you got this?
Yeah, I went to their funeral. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, wow.
Yeah, and that was the first time I'd ever seen Gar Thorsrud, which wound up being my boss there at Arizona.
Gar, that was short for Garfield, is that right?
Yeah, Garfield Thorsrud.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen his name, but I don't know much about him.
Well, he had a pretty tough job. I'd get teed off at Gar sometimes, some of the crap he did, but he had a pretty tough job. We were not a bunch of pussies. I mean, all of us were pretty wild creatures, and none of us were married then. And after about 2 or 3 years, they started hiring married jumpers, and it just kind of changed, We had a barracks, bachelor barracks, where we all stayed. And of course, we all lived together, worked together, ate together, played together. And then after he started hiring us the married guys, you didn't see them except when you went to work. And it was just different. And but Gar had a pretty rough job there at first, but it got easier as he started hiring calmer people.
Yeah. Makes
But
sense.
anyway,
I want to do
that. I got that phone call and I said, yeah, I think I would be interested. Of course, I was broke, and at the end of the semester, I don't think I had enough money hardly to get together to register again. But anyway, so he said, well, be at hangar number 6, I believe it was, at the San Antonio airport next Tuesday morning.
That was it? Wow.
And yeah, and I said, okay. So I went, got all my stuff together and checked out of school there, and I got all my books and all my stuff and closed the books on Texas A&M. Never went back. I wish I would have now, but I didn't. And I met down, they had an old C-46 sitting on the ramp out there. I'd never jumped out of C-46. I think I made 46 jumps for the Forest Service, but they were all out of either a Twin Beach, a Ford Tri-Motor, or a Traveler, and that old Canadian plane. I forget what they called that damn thing. We had an old Canadian airplane. We'd only haul 2 jumpers. I'd never jumped a C-46. That was a huge airplane compared to what we'd been using. But I flew into Marana, and when I got off the plane there at Marana, I looked over there, and there was an old B-17 sitting there with a big old yoke tied on the front of it with 2 big booms going out. I said, God, what's that? And they said, well, that's the Skyhook system. I'd never heard of anything like that. So I kind of looked it over, and I said, what's that for? I said, well, it's for picking people up off the ground without landing, just picking them up with this balloon that holds the line up in the air, and you pick them up and it jerks them up in the air. I said, boy, I bet that's exciting. Anyway, when we started working on that at Marana, old Fulton is the guy that came up with the idea, and we started working on that thing, and we had a dummy that we'd gotten from the Navy, and it was full-size dummy. It weighed 180 pounds, I believe, and it had a rubberized finish on it, and all the joints worked just like a human. But we found out when you pick it up, one of those arms or legs would fly over to one side, and then we'd start bringing it in. And when we first started making our pickups, we'd pull it in through the belly, through the Joe hole, we called it. When we get it up, start getting it close to the plane, it would start making big circles, And we said, oh, that's not too good. So we cut that thing loose a couple of times, and then we started taping down the arms and legs where they wouldn't do that. And it worked pretty good. And we got the dummy in finally, but it was still kind of jump around out there. And one day we were doing a pickup, and each time we'd do this, it was all new territory. We'd come up with new little ideas and better ways and better fixtures and whatnot. So we were kind of inventing this thing as we went, And one day we made a pickup, and we'd just circle around over the desert out there, so if something bad happened, there wouldn't be any people around. We made a couple of circles out there, and we were hauling that thing in, and that tape somehow on one arm and leg had busted, and you see those arms fly out, and we already had it within about 200 feet of the plane. It started making these huge gyrations, and it went way up in the air and came down and locked on the tail. We went into a bad left turn, and the pilots, what's going on? And good thing Ken Smith was in the belly, and he had a knife. And when that happened, the line got real tight, and it went to a winch up front. And he cut that line, and the thing fell off the tail. So otherwise, we had augered in right there.
Oh, my gosh.
And so when we got in, we said, that's it. We're not ever going to bring that thing in through the belly anymore. We're going to figure out a way to get it through the tail. And so they modified the tail. We still had the old plexiglass in there where they'd had the machine gunner in the tail,
Mm-hmm.
So they modified all of that and put a stainless steel floor in there and put a roller at the bottom where it would roll, when you pull something in, and it kind of slanted down.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then we, got all the sharp stuff out of the way that might hang up on something, and so we had to come up with a system for passing that line back. And I always ran the nose trigger on the thing up in front. We had those two booms came together in the middle, and there was about a 4-inch hub in there, and it had a slot in the middle. And in the middle of that slot, there was like a firing pin right in the middle, about 3/8 of an inch across. What I would do, I would wind that thing up 2.5 turns. And it had a kind of a locking device in there where you could crank it up and it would catch. It wouldn't come loose until you hit that firing pin. And so I'd crank it up, and we had to cut a hole in the nose with the plexiglass and put a little special door in there where I could poke out there with we had a little pole with an old rear view mirror off an old car, and we welded it on the end of that little rod, and I'd stick that out there because I couldn't see that firing pin, see? I had to have visual check to make sure that firing pin was extended, so when it hit it, it would release that hub. And what would happen, you'd hit that thing, and the line would come in through that slot, and I had to make sure that slot was up and down, and it would hit that firing pin, and that hub would wind up 2.5 times, just have the line winding on itself, and that's what held it. We didn't have any knot or nothing. And as soon as we picked it up, then the line that went over the top of the airplane to the balloon, we had a brake card on the balloon. The brake card would break and the balloon would float off. And then I'd have to pull that in through the top. We had a little access hole up in the top there in the nose. I'd open that up and pull that nose in there and cut it off so it wouldn't be flapping around all over the airplane out there. And then they would start their process in the back. When the guy in the belly, the joe hole, he would be laying down the back of the joe hole right on his belly with his arms extended. And when we'd make the pickup, that line would come right straight up in the middle, right there at the joe hole. He would just reach down with one hand and grab the line, and you could hold it right there. If you weren't there to hold it, it would go back down underneath the airplane. You couldn't reach it. So he'd just hold it with one hand, and then we would pass a block. I don't remember just now how we did it. We'd wind up passing a come along back there to the back. It would go to the winch, and then the guy in the tail would put it on we put the come along, I guess, at the belly and passed it back to the tail guy. And then he would pull it inside, and then the winch, it'd go up then we'd take that line off the come along, put it on the winch, and the guy would pull that come along on the line, and it would pull it in enough slack so you could cut the line there at the joe hole. And then the guy at the tail would take the end of that line, of the main line, and pull it in there and pass it up to the winch, and they would attach that to the winch and release the come along and wind the guy up. And
so
we
Toby,
had it where
you just figured this out yourselves, basically through experimentation?
Yeah, we just kept messing with it till we had it all working,
Golly. How long did all this take to figure out?
I don't think it took us after we got the tail modified. I think we had it all working in about 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
But I probably made 120 or 30 pickups in the nose. And but that old B-17, it was something else. We'd make those flights up there on that Arctic ice cap. We were making 14-hour flights. Boy, I'd never have since flown that many hours in an airplane.
Oh gosh, I bet. So, I'm really curious. This is something that must have been very secretive. Were you, given a security clearance or anything, or were you just warned not to talk about it?
Well, when they first hired us there, and when the guy told me you would be doing the same thing, Johnny and Daryl, well, everybody kind of knew they were working for the CIA, probably,
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of knew at first, but nobody said anything for a while. I think I was there for 4 or 5 months before they told me I had an appointment down at the motel, and I went down and I had to take a lie detector test, and that's when they told me that you're working for the CIA. And
oh, wow.
You got to keep your mouth shut. And I still remember my fake name they gave me. It was Scott E. Passret. I never heard that name before.
Huh.
I don't know where they come up with that. But anyway, and I'm sure they had a set of IDs and passport and everything in that name just locked up in case we needed it. But the reason we had the Skyhook system to start with is Al Pope was a pilot, and he'd gotten in on that Indonesian revolution down there, and we wound up on the wrong side.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and he got shot up and had to belly in a rice paddy there in a B-26, and he got captured. And he was in a prison down in Indonesia, and they were going to execute him. Kennedy was the president then, and his brother Robert was the Attorney General or Secretary of State or something. I don't remember what he was. But anyway, we'd made a mock-up. I don't know how they got all the info. Of course, the old CIA deal, the need to know. If you don't have the need to know, you're not going to know. So they got the info on the prison he was in, and we made a wooden mock-up there at Marana of the exact size of the room, the walls, everything, and we would pick that thing up out of that room to make sure it would work, you know. And it would. When you pick it up, that thing would go straight up for about 10 feet, and then it would take off, you know. And we put a G meter on it, you know, and we figured, God, there's no telling how many G's. It didn't even pull as many G's as the parachute opening. And the main reason was because we used a 5,000-pound woven nylon line, and it was like the Chinese finger. You know, it was hollow. You've seen that where you put your fingers in it and pull them apart?
Right.
Well,
right.
That's what it reminded me of. But anyway, it was nylon and a lot of stretch. So that first stretch, it'd go, when we'd pick it up, it'd go up above the airplane and then come back down almost to the ground and then come back up and just ride right along behind. And,
my gosh. So Toby, when you were developing all of this, did you know already that it was going to be used, or, you know, when did Indonesia come up, or when did the Arctic Circle come up? Was it only at the very end?
Well, right at the end. We didn't know anything at all about this Arctic Circle stuff. And then one day we found out Kennedy had done a trade-off with the Indonesians, and they released Al Pope. In fact, I think he came through Marana after he got loose.
Oh.
And so there we were with this thing and no place to use it. And about that time, I guess they'd been working on this Arctic stuff, you know, with trying to figure out some way to sneak in there. The Russians, of course, had their ice stations. We had ours. They were just spy stations, and they had all kind of listing devices. We did too. We copied all their transmissions. They copied ours. We picked up on the only way they had to get into their ice station was with a fixed wing airplane. There were no helicopters then that you could refuel in the air like you can now. They couldn't do that then. So we picked up on their transmission. There was a big crack in the ice heading for their airstrip. It was moving about 20 feet a day towards straight for their airstrip. And their one airplane there, they couldn't get out of there if they got the crack in there, see?
Mm-hmm.
Because that crack, what it would do, it would shoot ice up in the air 15, 20 feet, you know?
Oh, wow.
Where that crack had come together. So they kind of panicked. And, of course, we listened to all this and we knew about it. They all loaded up on their plane and took off before it got to the runway, I guess. So this was, I think it was North Pole 8 was the one we hit, the Russian outfit. But I think it was North Pole 6 or 7 that we were going to go to that they'd abandoned. And this one got abandoned just before we got up there, I think, see? So they changed it right at the end. See, back then, everybody thinks, well, God, that's kids play. You can go right to them. Well, not back then. Navigation wasn't what it was then. Is nothing like it is now. And this was in 1962 in June. There was no GPS, none of that stuff. In fact, the only we had to pick up a special navigator that worked for Pan Am in Seattle. And he was Jim Jordan was his name. And he was a special navigator. He could navigate with sun lines. And we had to put a special periscope in the front of the B-17 in the nose. And it was just like the ones on a submarine. You could had those handles on each side. You could move it around and look at stuff. And what he would do, he'd look at the stars and navigate, and the sun. And I don't know how it worked. He tried to explain it to me, and it was too much for me. But he had all his charts laid out up there, and he and I rode in the nose. And so I saw some of that stuff. He had all kinds of little protractors and compasses and everything laid out. But he wasn't very damn good at it because we couldn't find that thing.
That's too bad. Well, they were drifting with the ice, right? They wouldn't be in the same position day to day, would they?
That's right. It's just like a raft out in the ocean. It's not going to stay in one place. That ice is moving.
Yeah, that sounds challenging for sure.
Yep. But anyway, of course, the farther you go, if you're off just a tiny bit, the farther you go, the more it is,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we took off the first time. And of course, when the first time we take off, we've got all of that. We had that airplane that's crap full of stuff you couldn't move in there. We had both of the guys we were going to drop, and we had all of that Skyhook equipment and the special bottles of helium and the balloons and all the gear they used and the jumpsuits and their groceries for a week or whatever, And anyway, we take off. We had to put 2 400-gallon fuel tanks in the Bombay. They called them Tokyo tanks. I think they'd use those to go and bomb Tokyo.
Wow.
Anyway, so we had those 2 400-gallon tanks full. And then I think we had something like 4 barrels, 55-gallon barrels of gas in there too. But when we took off, I think we had 3,800 gallons of high-octane gas. And the only runway they had at Point Barrow, back then there was no oil or nothing, Hell, there wasn't nothing there but 4 Quonset huts.
Mm-hmm.
And a naval research station, which was really a spook station, CIA. But anyway, they had those Quonset huts, and everything was in there, And when we got in there, they had they had fuel in there for us, so we could fuel up. I don't know how they got that fuel in there. I guess with a submarine or something. I don't know. But they had fuel for us, and the only runway was a 5,000-foot PSP strip, and that PSP is that metal that fits together in those 6 or 8 foot sections, and you make a runway out of it. And they did a lot of it in World War II. And so that whole runway, there wasn't even a blacktop runway. It was that PSP. It was 5,000 feet long, and I never could figure out why, but there was a damn fence at the end of the runway. Why would you have a fence? There wasn't nothing up there.
Huh. That is strange.
But anyway, I guess it'd keep the bears off or something. I don't know. But every time we'd take off, of course, I was in the nose, and the yoke was right behind my head where they would pull that yoke back, taking off. And when we'd take off, we'd pull at the end of the runway, and they would whip it around real quick and swing the tail clear off the end of the runway to get every foot that we could. And they'd pour the coal to those 4 engines, and it'd be just sitting there shaking, and then they'd release the brakes, and off we'd go. And
oh man,
it just barely start moving. It was so slow, and then towards about 3/4 through the damn runway, you'd be wondering, oh hell, ain't no way we're gonna make it,
Mm-hmm.
And then, sure enough, after about 3/4 of the runway, we'd start bouncing, kind of, still on the ground but kind of bouncing. And then the bounces would get longer. And then finally one of the bounces would get up in the air a little bit, and you could see that damn fence coming,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm thinking, God, if we don't make it over that fence, we'd be burning for a week,
My gosh.
And so all that fuel, but we'd somehow and then of course I'm sitting there right there, and I could see the old Doug and Sieg could have that yoke clear back in their bellies trying to get that damn thing in the air,
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, it'd get up in the air, and my God, we'd just go forever and ever before we'd get more than 100 feet in the air. If you'd have lost the engine, it'd been in deep shit. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So anyway, we'd finally get started, and we'd head up there. And like I said, 14-hour flights. we'd get way to hell and going up there, and then he'd be in there doing those sun lines, trying to figure out where we were. And we made 2 trips without finding them. And God, our eyes were all red from sitting there and looking at that ice all day, looking for them. Everybody'd be looking out a porthole or a window somewhere trying to see something.
Mm-hmm.
And for hours, and we'd fly grids, and they weren't too worried about MiGs, but I sure as hell was. Hell, we weren't 50 miles from Russia,
Right.
We'd search till we barely had enough fuel to get home, and we'd take off. And we'd come in there and land. We'd just barely get there, and on fuel. It'd be 14-hour flight. The next day we did it again, same results. And the next day, Gar got a hold of that Navy guy. He says, they've got that P2V over in Greenland. He said, send that thing over here. They got better navigation and all that stuff. And of course, we had a set of instruments up in the nose, I guess, for the bombardier, or whatever they call him. That set the bombs, he had a set of instruments up there.
Oh, right.
And the old compass, we were up there so close to the North Pole, the compass would start swinging back and forth. So you couldn't navigate with a compass, After the second day, they sent the P2V in there. That was a long-range Navy plane, and it would fly 15, 16 hours. And they took off, I think, about 2 hours before we did. And they were really flying grids every which way, and they located them. And the day before, we thought we'd located it. We were getting all ready to drop these guys, but it turned out to be the wrong. It was one of our old sites. It wasn't even the Russian outfit. We were damn near ready to drop them. But anyway, the next day the Navy found it, and we had the photographs and everything to look at, and we knew that this was the right one. It was the Russian outfit. So we dropped the 2 guys and all their gear and headed on back in. And we waited, I believe it was 5 days to come get them. And the same old crap. First day we went out, couldn't find them, I don't know why they didn't put the P2V up there that first trip. But they didn't, So the next day they got the P2V again. But the next day the weather was going to hell, see? And we had a 500-foot ceiling. Hard to find the damn place. And then when you get down there, you got the 500-foot ceiling. And the balloon was on a 500-foot rope. But when the wind is blowing, that balloon gets closer to the ground. And we had Mylar markers on the main line so you could see where to run into it, where the pilots could zero in. Hell, I bet we weren't 300 feet off the ground when we picked those guys up. The wind was blowing so hard.
My gosh.
They'd popped some red smoke, and it was just right on the ground. And the first one we picked up was Lashak. He was the young guy. And he was kind of spooky. He'd only made 2 or 3 jumps, And they had a radio, but he didn't try to communicate with us because when we picked him up, old Smitty was an old hand. He was the other guy. He was an Air Force major. He was about 35. But boy, we called him Mr. Cool. God almighty, he was just cool as a cucumber. We picked up old Shack. First thing he did is he wouldn't turn his, all you had to do is hold your arms together and your legs together, and the harness would naturally, you'd go towards the airplane with your back to the airplane. And he was waving his arms around, and he got turned around, and had the wind in his face, and they couldn't even talk to him, Anyway, we finally got him in the damn airplane. And,
I cannot believe that you guys pulled that off, honestly, with all the challenges that you had to face.
God.
That's
That
incredible.
wind was blowing so bad you wouldn't believe it. We just knew that we were going to see that first, right after you pick them up, you make a pickup. That first time, whatever your load is going to go above the airplane, and then it comes back down. And if we hadn't had really good pilots, we never could have done it. Sieg, as soon as we made contact, Sieg gave full power and hauled back on that yoke. And we went up about 150 feet. And that's what saved those guys. Otherwise, they would have bounced off the ice.
Man, oh man.
And anyway, and then you couldn't see. It was like vertigo. See, you couldn't, everything was white, no horizon. Everything's overcast. And it's a wonder we didn't just fly right into the damn ice. But we didn't. Sig was pretty cool. He was a good pilot, and so was Doug. But we got Lashak in there. He was hanging on to a damn bulldozer they brought in there, a little bulldozer the Russians had. He was hanging under that thing, and the wind got him loose, and he was dragging along. He finally hooked his heels in a damn crack somewhere and stopped, and we got him. And when we're pulling him in, well, he was talking on the radio. He says, God, he says, it's colder than hell out here. Hurry up and get me in that airplane.
Wow.
And Lashak, we couldn't even talk to him. And Jerry said the first thing when they got Lashak in there, I guess nobody wants to know that, but hell, Lashak's dead anyway. As soon as Lashak got in the plane, well, Jerry said they were trying to give him a shot of whiskey or something, and said all he could do was go. And he couldn't even talk at first, but
oh my
I
gosh.
guess, I don't blame him for being scared. Hell, that's kind of a scary outfit.
Yeah, that's got to be an incredibly just exhilarating and frightening kind of moment. Had they done pickups before, the two of them, had they been picked up in training by the Skyhook before that?
I think Smitty had, but not Lashak.
Oh, wow. That was his first time, was in the Arctic.
First time, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he'd only made about 3 or 4 jumps,
My gosh. So why was he picked for that mission? Was it because of what
he had a doctorate in something like geophysics or something to do with sound and water and the ocean, He was well educated, and he was he was from New York City, and you could tell it, and I guess he was real smart, and he knew what to look for when we got there, I guess. But when we got back, well, him and Smitty had brought back a bottle of Russian vodka and a carton of Russian cigarettes. So we all had a big toast of Russian vodka and smoked a Russian cigarette.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and that was something else. Of course, you couldn't tell anybody about it. All highly classified. And they said, Smitty did tell us that the president was briefed on it.
Oh, wow.
And we did a reunion in the 80s. I don't remember, about 87 or 88 or what. Maybe, let's see, I think 25, it'd be 87, I guess. I think 25 years later, they took it off of the classified list. And we did a reunion in Las Vegas. And they had the old B-17 there.
Fantastic. That's so cool. That is so cool.
Yeah.
So do you happen to know, like, how valuable was the information that they collected? Because you guys took a tremendous amount of it.
The old need-to-know deal, we didn't know shit. But nobody told us anything.
Wow.
And we didn't ask.
I shouldn't be surprised by that.
But Smitty, when Smitty was at the reunion, but Smitty smoked a lot of cigarettes, and right after that reunion, he got lung cancer and died.
Oh, that's too bad.
But anyway, he was really cool. I liked him. And he said that they got some really, really good information. He said they even got part of the Russian encoding and decoding devices.
Really? Oh, like their ciphers for communication?
Yeah, whatever they used to encode and decode.
Oh, wow.
He said that they had, of course, the first thing we picked up, I told you we picked up Lashak first, but the first thing we picked up was the intel. And that was a big old duffel bag with about almost 200 pounds of mostly film and stuff they'd picked up, And a lot of film, because they took pictures of every damn thing they could and brought back a whole lot of it. So we never did know really but they did. Smitty said we got really, really good intelligence. And Smitty told me in Vegas, he said that the Russians, what really made it good was the Russians didn't even know we'd pull that off for 4 years. And guess how they found out in 4 years?
How?
A damn cocktail party in Washington, D.C. with a bunch of drunk politicians.
That's how it goes sometimes, isn't it?
God damn, isn't that something?
Jeez.
And then Smitty went to Moscow as a military attaché at the embassy. And he was spying. He could read, write, and speak Russian. That's why he was there. And Lashak couldn't read, write, and speak Russian. He just knew the intel stuff,
Right, gotcha.
And so anyway, at Smitty, we were there in Marana, and somebody picked up the paper and said, "Oh, look here!" Says, "What is it?" Says, "Oh, they caught old Smitty spying in Russia." And they did. They caught him passing off info to they turned one of those guys he was using for intel guy, and they laid up and waited for him, and they caught him. And put him in jail for a while, and finally they traded him out with another guy or something.
Jeez, yeah, I knew about Smitty. I was not aware that that had happened to him. I'm going to have to look into that more then.
Oh, yeah.
But how did you go from there all the way over to Laos after that? Was that like one right after the other, or was there a big...
Well, Jerry and I, when we left Marano, it was in the fall of 1964. And that's when we went on our, Jerry called it the elephant hunt. We didn't do anything but hunt and fish for 2 months. I think we spent something like 54 days in a row without sleeping under the roof of the building.
Oh, my gosh.
We were out in the woods at the Bob Marshall most of the time, the wilderness area. And we killed elk, antelope, mule deer, mountain goat, killed 14 Canadian honkers, floated the South Fork all the way through the Bob Marshall on 2 rubber boats, caught 2 bull trout on that trip. One weighed 11 pounds, one weighed 15 pounds. And a hell of a trip. And then we went right back in after that and went goat hunting and got 2 goats. So, and after that, after we did all our hunting, well, I went to work in the sawmill in Missoula for that winter. And then in the spring, I went to work in the woods hooking logs on a skidding jammer. And Jerry went to work for the railroad. He knew a guy that was a big dog in the railroad, but he only got one job, and that was Jerry. I couldn't get a job with him, so I went up and went to work in the woods, and I was hooking logs on a skidding jammer. And we heard that Bird and Son was hiring kickers. Bird and Son was the precursor to Continental Air Services.
Oh, okay.
In fact, when I put in my application, I put it into Bird and Son. In the meantime, right about the same time, Continental Air Services was a company that Continental Airlines created as a CIA proprietary to work in Vientiane, Laos. We had, I think it was 2 or 3 C-46s, and we had 2 382s, Lockheeds. That was the same as an E-model C-130. What an airplane.
Oh, yeah.
That was what we were working with, dropping ammo and rice, both, whatever. And hauling people, hauling all kinds of stuff. One thing really stood out to me was that C-130. One time we'd haul troops sometime, Lao troops.
Mm-hmm.
And we pulled up there and they must have had 500 troops out there. And we told the guy, I said, hell, we can't put all them in this airplane. And we asked I think it was old Judkins was the captain. And we said, how many do you think we can load? He says, oh, hell, just fill it up. He said, the ramp, so you don't close it on one of them. And then load them up in the front and back doors and tell them, don't sit down until we tell them to. So they were all standing up. They all had a weapon. That's what spooks you is about them goofy bastards with guns, And anyway, we got them all in there. We didn't even count them. We just loaded it up. And when we got in, all we could get in there, we closed both the doors and told them to sit down. And they were just like sardines,
Mm-hmm.
So we took them up to Vang Pao, which was a big old Lao army base up there. And when we stopped, we counted them. Guess how many we had in that airplane?
My gosh, I can't even imagine.
205. And the C-130. Wow. I bet you to this day, I bet nobody has ever hauled that many human beings in a C-130.
My gosh. I mean, did you have trouble making altitude or anything with that many people?
No, God, no. That thing was... Hell, you know what we hauled in there for rice? We would haul 4 pallets of rice. Each one of them weighed 12,000 pounds. That's 48,000 pounds.
Wow.
And the Air Force, the way they did it, you couldn't put but 36,000 pounds in the plane.
Mm-hmm.
And, because they had all that crap they used that you really didn't need. And boy, this was a stripped down cargo rig. And it had the best engines, too. And, man, it was unbelievable.
Amazing stuff.
Just had to be careful because it flew so damn fast you'd overfly your drop zone,
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
So how long did you end up working in Laos there?
Only about 10 months, and then they quit using American kickers on the airplanes, and I still think that was a mistake. They save money, but shit, all you got to do is lose one airplane.
Right. I mean, you guys were probably paid pretty well from what I understand, right? I mean, it was...
at the time, I think the most I ever made in a month in that 10 months, that was in 66. The most I ever made in 1 month was almost $1,700. course, that was a hell of a lot of money back then.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And the pilots, they made a ton of money, but of course, a lot of them did get spent.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I've talked to Neil Hansen from Air America before, and he certainly lost a lot of friends. I know that was a very common.
Oh God, yeah, there was a bunch of them. Yeah. Well, I sent you that picture of that book that Kirkley put out? Did you see that?
Yeah, I sure did. I haven't read that one yet, but I want to pick it up certainly.
Yeah, you want to get that. They've got some. Look at all the pictures. The pictures are really good. They got some really good pictures. And I found out some info. I'm looking at it. I found out some info that I was really trying to find out about a guy that disappeared over there, and they didn't find him for 30 days. And I found out, all about the day he crashed and all that stuff. And I remember his wife was from a little town right close to where I was from, and they'd invite me over there. He was a Continental pilot, and they'd invite me over for Mexican food every once in a while. And boy, she could cook good enchiladas. Nancy was his, and they had two little girls. One was 7, one was 4. And Johnny got killed in that damn plane crash.
Man, oh man.
Bad deal.
Yeah, you lose some good people. There's no doubt about it. It's a sad thing. So you were over there. I mean, did you like it over there? What was it that led you to leave after 10 months?
Well, they quit using American kickers, so I went over to Vietnam, went into Saigon. I went to the embassy, and I got a list of the American contractors I knew I could get a job. And the first one on the list was Alaska Barge and Transport. I went over there, and they hired me that day, and I went to work the next day. And I stayed 5.5 years. Went to work for them as a radio operator, and when I left, I was the office services manager. We saw a lot of action over there as a civilian. I was there during the Tet of '68, and in Saigon. And my God, I saw more dead people in one day than I've seen the rest of my life.
Really?
Oh God,
that must have been intense.
Oh hell, there was dead people on every corner damn near. They'd cover. Vietnamese couldn't even haul them all off in time. They'd have them covered up with newspapers. It'd be all bloated up.
Oh no!
And damn, I remember one time I was there by our office, and here come 2 deuce-and-a-half trucks by there, and they were heading for the morgue at Continental Airport in Saigon, and they were full of dead Americans, both of them.
Jeez, that must have been tough to see.
Oh man, I couldn't get that off my mind for a long time.
I bet. Were you living like in town there, or were you on a base or something while you were there?
No, I was just on my own. Alaska Barge gave us so much. They paid us and gave us a living allowance, and you could live wherever you wanted to. And during the Tet, well, I had machine guns down the road from me right there, and I had helicopter brass falling on the roof of my building.
Golly!
But it was scary there for a while,
Yeah, I'll bet. Did you have some kind of like escape plan if fighting broke out right near you? I mean, did you have to
all I'd traded a guy for I had a Browning 9mm pistol, 9mm. Had, I think it was 13 rounds in it. And that was my total protection right there. And I carried it half the time when I was working up there in the vehicle. We weren't supposed to do that, but I said, well, I'd rather get in trouble for carrying a illegal weapon than to be dead.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one.
But hell, I'd have to go get the mail when we had that Tet going. And I'd go out to Tonsinut sometime with our station wagon and take our mail out. We had daily reports we had to send in to Seattle every day,
Mm-hmm.
We used the mail. There weren't any computers then. And so we had to get the mail out. And I'd go, one time I was going down, and my God, I got in a damn firefight out there. And this is in Saigon during Tet. And my God, a horrible, huge explosion, And I'm in a dang station wagon. And boy, and people are running every which way. And I get up there, and they're dragging this guy up from a bridge down there. And he's a dead Vietnamese, and he's a sapper. He's got that black vest on with all these C4 blocks in his vest. And they'd killed him. And he was going to try to blow that bridge up, but he he had it underneath the sidewalk instead of the bridge. And he blew up the sidewalk.
Wow.
A lot of those bad guys were pretty dumb. One morning I was going to work, and inside, I was about the tip time too, and I'd walk to work, and I had to walk about half a mile where I lived in Saigon to where our office was. We had I was on the 6th floor. We had a 6th floor building, and I was on the top floor. I ran the message center then. We had the old, what do you call that thing, make those copies and all that stuff, addressograph and all that stuff, all the old machines that made copies. We had a Xerox machine, and it was a huge thing. It was one of the first ones, and nobody else hardly had any of those. But anyway, I was walking to work one morning. I hear a big old blow up about halfway to the office. Well, we were right across from the morning market, the big, huge market in Saigon. And there was a big circle out there, traffic circle, and there was a big park area in the middle, and they had a big walkway over the road on both sides where you go up above the pedestrian walkway. And what had happened, this sapper had climbed up in there, that walkway, and he was hiding up on that walkway, going to drop a charge down on a vehicle, a military vehicle, I guess, And he screwed up and blew himself up. And hell, he was scattered all over the place.
Oh my gosh.
But, we were in Saigon. While I was in Saigon, I had 2 of those Russian rockets, that 122. And it hit within 50 yards of me while it was at nighttime. And one of them hit in the road right out, and it blew out a window or 2, but didn't hurt anything. And the other one killed 4 little Vietnamese kids right there. Part of my ceiling fell in. It was right there next door, and that huge explosion, this damn ceiling fell in. Started the fire, and I went out there. Hell, I didn't know what was going on. Those little kids blowed all to hell.
Dang,
there's a lot of bad memories there for a while.
Yeah, what made you stay? I mean, it sounds like it was a pretty terrible environment in so many ways.
No, not really. It wasn't, that's like that one guy was talking about flying over in Laos. Well, he said about 90% of the time, he said it's just boring as hell riding around those old loud airplanes, just all loud as hell, just not doing anything. And then the other 10% of the time, it's what you call frantic moments.
Yeah, all right. You got a good point there.
Everything's blowing up or shooting at you or something,
Mm-hmm. Jeez. Yeah,
so
you're
either taking it easy or getting shot at, But it was, I don't know. I just kind of liked exciting stuff. Probably why most of those guys started jumping. They liked excitement.
Yeah, adventure, I mean, you certainly had your share of it there.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. I met the best people I ever met in my life with those jumpers, old Jerry, Shep, Pete, Max. Goddamn, some really good troops.
You guys really set a high standard back then. It certainly sounds like. So, Toby, you were only in Laos for about 10 months. You said you went on to Vietnam. Did your friend Jerry, did he stay in Laos the whole time, or did he go to Vietnam?
Oh, yeah, he stayed. He went back to work for GAR. He got his degree. He only needed a year, I think. He went back to school at Missoula and got his degree. Worked for the railroad there and rat-holed his money and went back to school. And he got his degree, and GAR hired him, called him and told him, hey, you got a job here, so you hurry up and get done, So I told Jerry, I said, Jerry, you better not go back over there. They're going to get your ass killed. Of course, he reminded me of somebody that's going to take care of a little puppy dog for somebody for 3 or 4 weeks. Well, you get attached to him. That's the way he was with the Hmong. He got over there, and after 2 years, he was supposed to rotate out or something. He stayed. And in Vang Pao, he liked Vang Pao, and he liked the Hmong. I trained those Vietnamese.
Well, what set apart the Tibetans and the Hmong then? Was it like a work ethic or something else?
You could just tell that they were dead serious, that they loved their country. You can tell that. They cared for their country, and you could tell when they were training. The Tibetans, hell, we had guys that were from 22 years old to 50 years old training.
Wow.
Jumping. Never jumped in their life, 50-year-old guys. And we trained them at Camp Hale. I never did make any of those trips over there, but I helped train them at Camp Hale.
Okay, yeah, that was for the missions going on in Tibet at the time.
Yes.
Right? Okay, you weren't involved in those?
Nope. The last bunch that was trained, helped train them over there at Camp Hale. We
Okay.
gave them jump training and dropped them at Colorado Springs at the air base. Gave them 3 jumps, all daytime jumps. And
Okay, but they made a really good impression on you there at Camp Hale, at least.
oh yeah, they weren't the best physical specimens, but they were dead serious, sincere, and loved their country, and that amounts to a hell of a lot to me.
Yeah, it certainly does. It certainly does.
And the Hmong are the same way. I've got, that book, when you get it, open it up and look at the picture of those Hmong soldiers. We used to haul some of those guys around up there to a hospital, wounded, And,
Well, yeah, I'll definitely have to look at that, but I can believe it. I mean, I haven't worked with any Hmong overseas, but the few that I know here in the United States that I've met, just wonderful people, just one and all, very family oriented, very hardworking, very successful.
And Vang Pao, I'll tell you one thing Vang Pao said about Jerry. Vang Pao said that Jerry Daniels was the only American that he ever knew very well that didn't lie to him.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that tells you something. So old Landry and them other guys, they lied to him,
Mm-hmm.
And I never could figure out how Landry and them could look themselves in the mirror after walking out and leaving those Hmong surrounded by 200,000 North Vietnamese at 20 alternates. They slaughtered them,
Mm-hmm.
Nobody there reported it or nothing.
Are you talking about like in 1975 when we were withdrawing and everything? Yeah.
Yep. When Jerry pulled out. And then Jerry stayed over there seeing. I still got 4 or 5 letters I got from Jerry. I saved them. Of course, he could speak the language. He was fluent. If they couldn't come up with the right answers, they didn't go. And a lot of them got really pissed at him, In fact, you probably heard about the one he called Mystery Man.
I don't know. Toby, if you don't mind, can you just back up a little bit? Because I know what you're talking about because I've read so much about Jerry, but, people listening, hearing about him for the first time. So he was there for years and years and just totally immersed himself in the culture, right?
Yes, that's right. He stayed up there. He was the only American I ever heard of that actually lived with the people the way they did. The only one. The rest of them would be up there. They'd have a nice building built and they'd have plumbing and cooks and maids and all that shit. Not Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
And he lived right there with them. And Vang Pao Vang Pao thought the world of Jerry, and Jerry thought the world of Vang Pao.
So how did he go from, working like as a kicker or something like that to being so close to the people there? Was it like a gradual thing, or was he given an alternate?
Well, I think he first went over to Laos. I believe it was in 65, I believe. I think he had been there about a year when I got there.
Okay.
But first time he went to Laos was when Johnny and Daryl got killed. He was over there as a kicker then. He was only about 19 years old.
Oh, wow. So he was there even before you got in the country. Okay. Wow.
He was in 61. He was over there, but he only spent, I don't know, 6 months maybe not even that long. They rotated him out, But he was there with Johnny and Daryl. In fact, he was there when they got killed,
Mm-hmm. So he just kind of gradually grew close to a lot of the people he was working with. Was that what happened?
He was just kind of he was an easygoing guy, and we all drank a lot of beer and had a good time. And Shep and Jerry and I joined the Arizona Rodeo Association at Tucson. Hell, we rode in about 7 rodeos. And we never were real good at it, but I got a 4th in horses one time, barebacks, and a 4th on a bull one time, but they only paid 3 money. So I was screwed there. But anyway, I used to rub that in on Jerry. I said, Jerry never did ride a bull. That's the only bull I ever rode out of 7. I rode 1 out of 7. I got a 4th place. And I'd say, well, Jerry, some of us have been on a bull for 8 seconds. He said, go to hell. Shep rode saddle broncs, and Jerry and I both rode bulls and barebacks. We had a bareback rigging and a bull rope. You didn't have to pack a bunch of stuff around, just a pair of spurs and a glove, and your rigging. And we'd go. Of course, it was an adventure for us.
Mm-hmm.
Just something we wanted to try, see how good we were. And we weren't too bad. We was getting there when we quit. And the reason we quit, Gar was on us all the time about, you're going to get hurt. We said, hell, Gar, it's not any more dangerous than jumping out of an airplane. Said, hell, we told him, we said, come to this rodeo. We're going to be riding it. Come on and see this rodeo next Saturday night. He says, all right. So him and Audrey went to the rodeo to watch us ride. So me and Jerry did our thing, and then here comes Shep on a saddle bronc. I'll be damned, about 2 jumps. He got bucked off, hung his foot in the stirrup, and that horse dragged him all over the damn arena about 3 times. And they finally got him loose from the damn horse, and he was laying there, and they hauled him out the damn ambulance to the hospital. And that, and Shep, he was okay by Monday. They kept him overnight one at the hospital, but he just got bruised up, nothing broke. He looked like hell, but anyway, Monday, Gar called us in and says, all right, boys, said, either going to be rodeo riders or you're going to work for me. You're not going to do both. And that was the end of our rodeo.
I bet. Gar did have a tough job, it sounds like, with you guys.
Well, we were working there. That was in 62, 3 and 4. All the guys worked in the loft. None of them were married then, see.
Oh, right.
It's kind of like the smoke jumpers, There wasn't none of us married when we were jumping. And now they're all married. Hell, they've been there 40 years, But you don't get the camaraderie when you don't live together and work together and play together.
Yeah, that's true.
In McCall, we had a chow hall. We all ate together. We did calisthenics together every morning, ran 2 miles every morning. And we worked together. We were on fires together. And you get to know people and trust people, and kind of like when we were flying over there. You're in that old C-46 with somebody taking off with full load. You don't want some pussy in there that's going to start screaming and hollering if you lose an engine. You want somebody that can help you push that crap out,
Yeah, that's when you really got to know the person beside you, I can imagine.
That's right. You got her. And it really separates the men from the boys when you get in a panic situation.
Yep. Did you see any of that in Laos or Vietnam? Were there guys there that just weren't cut out for it and had to be, let go or reassigned or any of that?
Yeah, I saw some of that, both in Laos and Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you see that. I wouldn't give no names, but same with pilots. Some of those pilots were great, and some of them were the shit.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were spooky. It's kind of like when you're riding in a car with somebody. You can tell somebody knows how to drive, and if they don't, jerking the wheel around and cutting the corners. And same with an airplane. If it's a rough ride and can't make a good turn, well, you want to stay away from that bastard.
Sure. So Toby, with Jerry, from what I recall, I mean, he worked for years, for Continental and all that, but eventually he did get picked up by the CIA proper, right?
Oh, he was working for the CIA proper all the time. But
oh, really?
Continental carried him on their rolls as an employee.
Oh,
he was what they called a customer over there. The CIA guys were called customers. And
interesting. Okay.
We had a lot of unwritten laws over there. Like you didn't let any reporters get on an airplane. I don't give a shit who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And any strangers, we didn't let nobody get on an airplane unless we knew who they were. The only civilian we hauled around up there was not Pop. We'd haul Pop Buell once in a while, but he had a chopper. But we'd Father Bouchard, that was his name, that French priest. And he'd be all over Laos. God, he was there forever. I don't know how long he was there. But we'd give him a ride anytime he wanted one. All those Hmong, they just like to ride. I think we'd give them a ride if we were going to tell them where we were going. If they wanted to go, we'll hop on.
Oh, wow. Just like a free taxi kind of thing for them?
Oh, yeah. It was just, they didn't pay nothing. Hell, you never know. There'd be one of them had a basket of ducks. One that came on there one day, we saw him running, trying to catch the plane. Said, what the hell is he carrying? Some kind of suitcase? It was a big old lizard, about 4 feet long.
What?
He had his mouth tied up and his feet tied together and his tail tied around to his head. And he was carrying him by that part from the tail to the head. It was like carrying it like a suitcase.
Oh, my gosh.
It was alive. He was going to eat it, he said. Yeah.
Wow. Said, so bringing a live lizard with him for a little trip, huh? That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. And old Tony Poe, he was, I had a couple of heroes over there in Laos. It'd have to be Jerry, Tony Poe, and Vang Pao. That'd be my 3. And they were great people. And I tell you, when Tony first went over there, My God, I think he first went over to Laos in something like 58 or something like that, right after Dinh Minh Phu. Dinh Minh Phu was 54.
Mm-hmm.
When he went into Laos, he was Special Forces, or if he even had Special Forces, he's probably something else. I don't know, but he was one of the elite.
Right.
He came into Laos, and he was a teetotaler, did not smoke, drink, nothing like that. And hell, by the time he left over there, he was a alky on that damn old Lao, that sorry rot gut whiskey those Hmong made, you know.
Oh, geez.
Just
a habit. I mean, just was it like a? I mean, to build relationships there, and it got away from him.
I think he started doing that just to put up with the crap they had to put up with.
Yeah.
Jerry would tell me some of the bullshit they had to put up with. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
You can see why we couldn't win our damn war. You got some lieutenant in the embassy in Vientiane and telling you how to fight a war, you know.
Yep.
If they'd have turned that thing loose with Jerry and Tony Poe and Vang Pao, they'd have kicked those North Vietnamese ass in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, I've heard he was incredibly effective. I mean, he's a very controversial guy. Even now, a lot of people are, completely disturbed by what he did, but I guess he did what he felt like he had to win.
He didn't jack around. One time Jerry told me about they up at Site 36, Nha Trang. Well, Jerry was there forever and ever. But anyway, they Air America chopper came in there one day and landed. And boy, that guy in the chopper captain, the pilot, come over to Jerry. He was pissed off. He said, "God damn, it's bad enough. We got to get shot at by the North Vietnamese. There ain't nothing but friendlies here. And come here and look at this. Somebody shot a hole in my chopper when I flared out to land." And
oh my gosh,
Jerry says, "Oh God!" And he called Vang Pao. Vang Pao was up at 20 alternate. And Vang Pao said, "Tell that man to stay right there and don't go anywhere. I'll be there in an hour in a chopper." Sure enough, here comes this Air America chopper in there. Vang Pao gets out. He shouts a few orders. And boy, they got every man in that place standing at attention out there. And Vang Pao says, "I want the guy that shot that hole in that chopper up here right now." And 2 guys started dragging this guy up there. And he was kicking and screaming, crying, and he knew what was going to happen. Jerry went back up to his hooch up there where the radios were. He had to make a call out, So he went up there, and this little Hmong, about 4 feet tall, come running up to him, stood at attention. He said, "What is it?" "General Vang Pao says you must come." So he went with him, and they had this guy tied up out on the drop zone there. And as soon as Jerry showed up, well, this old boy had this old, that old M2 30 caliber carbine. It had a banana clip in it, about 20, 30 rounds. And he just jacked that thing around there and emptied it in that old boy, and they buried him right there.
Oh my gosh.
And Vang Pao said, you tell the chopper pilots about this. And Jerry did. He says, Vang Pao's famous saying was, "No more problem."
My gosh.
No more problem.
Any idea why he was shooting at the Air America chopper? Was he a...
Jerry said they asked him, he said, "I just always wondered if I could hit one of those things."
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Bad mistake.
Well, he found out, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
But those little guys were fighters.
Mm-hmm.
So Jerry, for them, I still do, about the way we left them,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was horrible. I mean, that played out for years and years from what I understand.
Oh, I still see old Lucky once in a while, old Lucky Yang.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a good friend. And Jerry gave him the name Lucky. He survived 2 helicopter crashes in a week. One of them, he was the only one that got out.
Really?
And
Jerry
would give them all nicknames. I guess you heard about that.
No, I don't think so. Tell me about that.
Oh, hell, he nicknamed Lucky. And, of course, everybody picked up on it. And then, there was one he called the Glass Man, one he called the Tall Man. I'm trying to remember some of them. He'd give all those moons a name.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, his code name over there was Hog, H-O-G, Hog. Everybody knew him as Hog over there, the people had code names. But Jerry would stick right with old Vang Pao. Vang Pao, when they had a shootout going somewhere, he'd be right in the middle of the damn thing. And he got, the first time I ever met Vang Pao, it was in '66, and he couldn't raise his right arm. He had to shake hands left-handed. And he'd been wounded in the right arm and shoulder. And after that, they sent him back to the States for surgery, and he got to where he could use his arm again.
Hmm.
But he got wounded 2 or 3 times. And he'd be right up front.
Yeah. So, Toby, by this point, as I understand it, Jerry was Vang Pao's case officer. Is that right? I mean, he was his primary point of contact with the CIA.
That's right. Everywhere Vang Pao was, you could probably see Jerry right there pretty close.
Was that because that's what Vang Pao wanted, or was it just because, I mean, was Jerry hired by the CIA, or because of his, capability with the Hmong?
Because Vang Pao wanted it that way.
Okay.
They tried to put other guys in there, and he didn't care for them. Jerry's the one that stuck, and Jerry would eat with the people. He'd squat down on his ass and eat sticky rice with his hands, and just like the Hmong.
Mm-hmm.
And no other American would do that. And they'd all want to go back to 20 alternate at night or something, or go into Vientiane for the weekend. Hell, he didn't do that. He stayed right there.
Sure. Yeah, that must have made a tremendous impression on him. I can see how they would love to see that.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I was at Vietnam over there, I stayed up there at Long Con training them Vietnamese. Well, Jerry and I used to kill a lot of doves down there in Arizona. We'd big on bird hunting. We'd go shoot the hell out of those doves with our shotguns. And when I got over to Vietnam, they had that 5,000-foot strip, and we were out in the middle of the boondocks. And hell, every morning I could hear those wild chickens crowing out there, just like a banning, And I started noticing there were doves out there on that runway picking gravel for their crawl. Hell, they looked just like our doves. So I got a hold of the guy. When we first went out there, we went into Saigon to the armory at the embassy, and they told us we could pick a handgun and a submachine gun. Well, I'd never fired a submachine gun, so I took 4 or 5 different kinds. Hell, I had a Spicer and a Uzi, and the one I liked was that Swedish K. That's one I stayed with. But they had a Thompson, every kind of gun in the world you could have. So I tried them all, and I stayed with the Swedish K, a Browning 9mm pistol. And so I called the guy at the armory on the radio, and I said, "Hey, I need a 12-gauge shotgun and some bird shot, number 8 shot or something." He's all right. Goddamn, about 2 days, the truck come in here. Guy's got me a case of ammo, number 8 shot, and a damn riot shotgun, with the sling on it, and it holds about 6 rounds or something. And I got a Vietnamese out there that could drive our Jeep. And just about sundown, that runway, they had it for those Japanese, and it was real wide. God almighty, it must have been 150 feet wide and 5,000 feet long. Big laterite dirt strip. Laterite is kind of like caliche. It was kind of a red stuff with shells in it, Made good runway. Anyway, I'd get that Vietnamese, and I'd sit on the hood of that damn Jeep. We had a sack there. And we'd drive down one side of that thing. I'd tell him to drive real slow down there. Those doves would fly up, and I'd down them. And hell, when we'd make about 2 rounds, I'd have that damn sack full of doves. And we'd go in and clean them and take them over to Vietnamese chow hall and cook them up. And I'd eat with the Vietnamese every once in a while. And most of the time I'd eat with the Special Forces guys. They had their kitchen up there set up, the A-team. But I'd go down and eat with those guys at least twice a week.
But I can see then why, Jerry would have been so, I don't know if I'd say enamored, but so happy to spend so much time around the Hmong there in Laos.
Well, Jerry, when I was there, Jerry would come into Vientiane every once in a while, about once a month, and he'd stay there at the Continental compound. We'd go down to Lulu's and the White Rose, all the local bars, and have a big time. And
so did he come back to the U.S. very much? I mean, it sounds like he just built like a new life there pretty much.
He didn't make too many trips back here. When he did, he'd usually call me when he came back. He had my phone number, and he'd call me, and we'd talk a while, and that's the first time he told me about the mystery man,
Yeah. Who was the mystery man exactly? I didn't get that.
Well, everybody had a lot of ideas about it, but I talked to Jerry about the mystery. I said, "What the hell's a mystery man?" He said, "I don't know. It could be he says, it sounds like a Thai, really, but I believe it must be a Hmong." but he says he talks kind of like a Thai, but he says he's told me he's going to kill me, and he won't tell me why. He just said he's going to kill me, and he says I think it's one of them I turned down that wouldn't let him come to the States.
What in the world?
Well, when he was checking them out, see, if they lied on any of that stuff and it came out that they'd lied, they were done. He'd kick them out.
Yep. I got you.
There wasn't no questions asked. I mean, that was it. They'd tell him, oh yeah, I work for Colonel Poe or something, and I was his driver or something. And he knew Colonel Poe or something, and he'd check him out, and Colonel Poe said, no, I never saw that guy in my life.
Oh, I see.
That was it. He was down the road,
So, Toby, just so I'm understanding, we're up to 1975 or post 1975 now.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So he was involved with getting like the refugee visas.
That's it. Yeah,
at
he
that
was
point,
kind of in charge of it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's now. This has taken place all in Bangkok, I think, at the U.S. Embassy in Bangkok.
Yeah, and at the refugee centers, he was in them all the time. But he stayed in Bangkok. He had an apartment there. The Hmong had 2 big refugee centers, I think. And the Thais didn't like Hmong. They didn't like nobody. They didn't want them staying in Thailand. They didn't want them around. So Jerry was shuffling them over here as fast as he could. And the rest of them he'd just send back to the refugee center, I guess. I don't know what they did with them.
So he was instrumental in getting a lot of people. I mean, you said he cut the liars, but he also was able to help a lot of people get to the U.S., get out of these refugee camps later on, right?
Yeah, his word was like God, with the, and he was actually listed on his passport and everything as a State Department employee when he was doing the refugee work.
Mm-hmm.
But he was still CIA.
Oh, really? Okay, so he was not State Department. I mean, I know that's common to say you're State Department when you're with the CIA, but he had not left the agency ever.
No.
Okay, I've got you. Okay, so he's like a I don't know, 15-year veteran employee of theirs by this point, veteran case officer.
Probably, yeah, something like that, or maybe close to 20, counting all his Lao time.
Okay, yeah, I recall reading something about how his title, like he was given a position as the ethnic affairs officer at the embassy, I think. And as soon as I read that, I was like, that's got to be just made up. That doesn't sound like, a typical job that was already at the embassy before he arrives.
Yeah, that's something that they came up with.
Yeah.
Cover for him. Yeah.
That makes sense. So, well, what was the benefit? I mean, do you have any idea like why the CIA wanted him doing that? I mean, I understand he wants to save these people, but did they just want to continue to support their people?
I think Jerry just told them, I'm going to do this. If you don't let me do it, I'll just quit, But Jerry made up his mind. He was going to help them Hmong all he could. Yeah,
I mean, they certainly deserved it, and he certainly was the right man in the right place, it sounds like, to give them all the help they needed.
He was really thoroughly upset the way that happened over there, how we run off and left them like that. And all them people talk about what a good job Landry and all those guys did. They were a bunch of assholes. I would have quit my job and gone over there personally and helped those guys instead of doing like Landry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't care what the rules were. Who's going to go by the rules? Piss on them. Get some A1Es in there and bomb the shit out of them,
Yeah.
We couldn't get nothing done. Jerry used to tell me stories you wouldn't believe. I remember one of the best ones was when he'd go down to the embassy all the time to brief all these assholes. There was a lieutenant, some kind of military attaché, and he was asking the questions, and I guess the ambassador and everybody was in there. They said, well, did they tell us about that airstrike yesterday or day before? And Jerry said, well, we called in, we said they had a bulldozer up there doing bomb repair on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the road. Said we were trying to get an airstrike in there to get that bulldozer, And says, finally, here comes 2 F4s. Each one of them has got 2 500-pound bombs. That's it. No strafing, no nothing. 2 500-pound bombs. They're going about 900 miles an hour. Jerry said neither one of them got within a quarter of a mile of the damn bulldozer.
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling them all that. Said, yeah, they dropped their 4 bombs and left. And said that you could hear them on the radio. This is Bluebird, Mom. This is Bluebird 2. We got 6 minutes over the target area, And hell, they didn't have no fuel. They're going so fast and everything. Anyway, Jerry says, no, they didn't get them. And Jerry says, well, I think they might have got that bulldozer driver. I think they might have got his wheelbarrow. And the lieutenant says, what wheelbarrow? And Jerry said, the one he hauled his balls around in.
Oh my gosh.
And it really pissed him off. But Jerry didn't give a damn, he's sick of that crap.
Mm-hmm.
He told me one time, listen to this, Jerry told me this, and as far as I know, I don't think they ever did send out less than 2 planes on a mission, except with that B-26.
Mm-hmm.
That Onmar, they called it something else. I don't remember what they called it. But it was the B-26. And the ones that really did the damage, they had 4 50 calibers in the nose and 2 on each wing.
Really?
And you load that thing up with 50 caliber explosive rounds. Jerry said he called in one time and they had 15 trucks and coming down the trail in a row. And he called in just at daylight, said that they came in with that, I can't remember what they called those things. They had a name for them. But anyway, Jerry said that guy came through there right out of the sun on him, made one pass, and he swooped up in the air and called Jerry. He says, well, I can't understand it. I only got 12 of them burning. One pass.
Wow.
And that's what he would try to get he couldn't pick his airplanes or nothing, They couldn't call their shots, He sent them a damn F4 going 900 miles an hour with it. Jerry used to call them as a $10 million airplane and a 10-cent pilot.
Wow.
They didn't like to hear that,
Mm-hmm.
And Jerry, as far as the yellow rain, I talked to Jerry and wrote him letters. He wrote me back, all that stuff. Jerry said the yellow rain was nothing but bullshit. So they had all kinds of rewards posted for anybody that could bring in yellow rain, any samples or anything like that, or stories, or anybody who's been hit with yellow rain, go to the doctor and let them scrape it and look at it. And he said there must have been 100 of them tried this shit. None of it said it was either pollen or just dust, or none of it was poison. And Jerry, they didn't want to hear that because they were really pushing the claim that the North Vietnamese and the Russians were dropping chemical weapons on them,
Mm-hmm.
And Jerry was the kind that says, if they were, I'd let you know, but they're not doing that. And they didn't want to hear that shit. And I think that might be one of the things that got him killed.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he was getting ready to pull the plug. He told me a couple of times, he wrote me when I was at Alaska Barge and asked if he thought I could get a job there. And I said, hell yeah, you get over here, I'll get you a job. And he was ready to leave. He was getting sick of it. But if it hadn't been for Vang Pao, he would have left. I'll guarantee you.
Now, is this what, like 81, 82 at this point? When is this exactly?
Oh, hell, this would have been, this is in the 70s.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Hell, the 69, 70, along
Oh, geez. Did you stay in touch with him pretty regularly after, 75, when he was just there in Bangkok for years working out of the embassy?
Oh, yeah. We'd write letters back and forth. I didn't keep all his letters. I think when he got killed, I looked around and found a bunch of old boxes of junk, and I think I wound up with 5 or 6 of his letters. Still got them.
Good. Yeah, that's wonderful.
I showed him to old, what's her name? Gail Morrison. She saw him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, biographer of his.
I think one of them, he's telling me about trying to get him a job, and so he's really getting fed up with these assholes.
I think I might have seen an excerpt from that one in one of the articles about him, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he sounded very upset with how things were going there in Bangkok with the whole refugee process.
When Gail Morrison wrote her book, they had a book signing over here at Hamilton. I think it was Hamilton, over in Montana here. And I went to that. I wanted to go over there. And there must have been 50 or 60 people there. And there was a couple of older couples there. And this one guy, I'm just sitting there listening. And he gets up and he says, well, I'm so-and-so. I work for the State Department. And I never did see any evidence that Jerry Daniels did not believe in yellow rain. And as soon as he said that, I said, hold it. I said, I knew Jerry as good as anybody. He told me on several occasions that yellow rain was nothing but a bunch of bullshit. That's the words I used right in front of everybody. Oh, he got red faced and sat down and shut his mouth.
Yeah, can you tell us about the yellow rain for those who don't know?
Well, we were pushing that theory that yellow rain was something that some kind of chemical warfare that the North Vietnamese and the Russians were dropping on the Hmong. Of course, nobody would be more interested in that than Jerry,
Right, of course.
He told me, several times. He said, "No, I just begged them to bring me any kind of information, that'll show me a sample of it. Oh, I guarantee you, I'll take care of it and get it to the embassy and they can check it." He said none of it ever panned out. He said 3 or 4 of them was pollen,
Oh, wow.
and dust and all kinds of junk. He said none of it ever. He said he never did actually see people that were sprayed from the air and told about it and had scars or anything like that. No evidence,
Yeah, I'm sure if anybody would have, it would have been him, as well as he was liked and respected.
Jerry sure as hell wasn't no friend of the Russians,
Of course.
And so he just wanted the truth. He didn't give a shit. It teed him off to see they were lying like that,
Yeah, I can imagine. He sounds like, he had a lot on his mind there,
well,
a lot
hell,
going on. He was
I told you, I read that thing by Janet Ray. She was here at my house with Miles Johnson. And that must have been 20 years ago, or 15 at least. And she was still upset about that when she came here, and she was still chasing down info about her dad, when she was here. And look at all the crap that she put up with trying to get information.
Oh, I know it. Yeah, she told me all about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like Jerry, they talk about, well, they don't have any proof that Jerry was ever murdered. I said, you think we didn't have American doctors in Thailand, all over Bangkok, many American doctors? Jerry's brother, Jack, had a doctorate in physiology. You think he didn't know what carbon monoxide is? And he said, that's bullshit. There's no way he could have got killed with carbon monoxide. He said, the bottom of the door was an inch off the floor. He said a mouse could climb under there. That carbon monoxide would have gone to the bottom and gone out the bottom of that door. Jerry was in a bed.
Can you tell us, how was he found exactly? Because you and I know, but a lot of people don't, of course.
Well, I think he'd been out on the town tooting it up, drinking. And he'd fell off the wagon. He'd go on the wagon, for 6 months at a time, never drank a beer. And when he'd fall off, look out. But anyway, he'd fell off the wagon, and he'd been out having a few. And this Thai kid was with him. I think he kind of took to that Thai kid. He was helping him. He was just trying to help the kid going to school. He'd let the kid stay in his apartment sometime, and the kid was staying there. What gets me, Jerry was pretty big. He had a pretty high up job. And you'd think if he didn't come to work, somebody would kind of be interested in that, wouldn't they?
Right.
Well, hell, he'd laid there 2 or 3 days in that heat in Bangkok before they decided to go up and check on him. And of course, he'd been dead. Hell, they couldn't even tell who it was. They couldn't even tell if it was a Caucasian or nothing, He was just about melted. So anyway, they got the Thai doctor. And when they flew him back to the States, they flew him to New York instead of coming back to Hawaii.
Really?
Yeah. And they stopped in New York for a day or two. I think 1 day. Why would they do that? And when they got him,
they went west. They went west from.
Yeah,
from Thailand?
His body came in here from New York.
Huh.
Yeah.
I would not have expected that at all. That is very
no.
odd.
That's there's so many red flags,
Right.
And the carbon monoxide and all the crap and why would you have a Thai doctor doing an autopsy on somebody that's way up in the embassy?
Yeah, there's got to be a medical officer. That's the whole point of having a medical officer, is for the needs of the embassy personnel, right?
Yeah. And then when the body got there, it was in a sealed coffin. It was in a beautiful coffin made out of teak, I believe. Really pretty. And it was, of course, the Hmong are really superstitious people, And they said, no, that's not Jerry. That's it. They got a pig in there.
Mm.
And they didn't believe that was Jerry. They just didn't want to believe that Jerry was dead, because Jerry, God, you should have seen them ceremony. He'd done so much for them, you know.
Yeah, this is the funeral in the U.S. with the people that have come over, the refugees, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that, because I've heard it was incredible, honestly.
Oh, yeah. I came up from Texas. I went to the funeral. Of course, Jerry's mother, I thought the world of her, Louise. She thought the world of me. And I've still got a couple of the mementos that she gave me that were Jerry's, like the string tie with the ram's head on it and Jerry's smokejumper belt buckle she gave me. Mm-hmm. I've still got them. Louise, she was really upset. Then they were talking about, says, Kent, you know, the animal man, I call him. Kent was saying, well, do you think we ought to pop that casket open? I told him, I said, by God, if that's my brother, I would. I don't care what they say.
Right.
I said, I'd pop that thing open. I'd have an x-ray machine out here. I'd x-ray everything about that thing. I'd get samples, everything, and make sure. If you don't, you're going to be sorry. And they didn't, and they were sorry. And they exhumed his body here about 5 years ago. And it was Jerry. They did the DNA and all that.
Okay, yeah, I've been wondering now about that for a long time, because it took, was it 35 years, basically, to actually do a DNA test?
Yeah, probably that. And there were no broken bones or bullet holes or nothing like that. So it looks like he actually died from the carbon monoxide. But, you know, what caused the carbon monoxide, huh?
Yeah, that's a real, freakish accident to happen to a guy who was, so well known.
A lot of old timers that knew about stuff like that claim that Jerry and Vang Pao both had big contracts out on them by the North Vietnamese and the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
That anybody could kill them and get a lot of money. You know?
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, what is your personal opinion about it after all this time? I mean, do you think that it was an accident or something more?
No, I saw too many lies about the CIA.
Yeah,
like John Merriman, I told you about that.
Yep.
That really pissed me off. About my Agent Orange deal, couldn't even get a goddamn physical.
Mm-hmm.
That really double barrel pissed me off. I'm not kidding. I was really upset about that. I was really upset. I mean, not like wasn't trying to file a claim. I just, hell, the way they had that on TV, it sounded really bad, and I wanted to get a physical. They claimed they didn't have any record of me ever being in Vietnam. You know?
Right. They just wanted to shuffle you out the door and let you stop being a problem. It sounds like problem for them anyway.
Go away and shut up. Yeah.
Man.
Kind of like Janet, same deal.
Yeah. She was on quite a journey. She's still on that journey in so many ways.
Yeah. So if you don't shut up, we'll quit sending that $225 check twice a month.
Yeah. It's a carrot and a stick at the same time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that they didn't do the tests at first. Now, was that because of his mom, Louise? They just didn't want to upset her? That was kind of the impression that I got about it.
Kind of Louise, I think, and Kent, between them, they'd call the shots, and Jack too, I guess. But I think Jack wanted to open it. I wasn't there when the decision was made, but the Hmong just almost insisted, no, we got to open it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a tough situation. I mean,
Louise,
his mom and everything.
Upset. She wasn't thinking straight anyway. She was really upset.
Sure.
Jerry was her favorite. Goddamn.
Yeah. What a tragedy to lose her son like that. And he had been through so much. I guess she kind of had to understand, you're going to go spend years in Southeast Asia during the war. Something could happen. But this, of all things, is unexpected.
Well, Ken Hessel called me, and Hessel worked with us down there in Arizona. And Ken Hessel wound up marrying the sister of John Lewis, who got killed over in Laos.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Hessel called me and told me about Jerry. He said, well, old timer, I hate to tell you, but old Jerry bought the farm. I said, oh, goddamn.
Oh, man.
I said, what was it, damn helicopter? He said, no. Found him dead in an apartment in Bangkok. And the red flag went up, boy. You can't believe anything they tell you, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And it could have happened just like they say, but I doubt it very seriously. They got a bad reputation for lying to people.
Right, yeah.
Just like they don't have any conscience either, Like Merriman's widow telling her that he was killed in a car wreck.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of bullshit is that, huh?
Yeah, it was a plane crash in the Congo, right?
Yeah. he was strafing those bad guys with it. I guess it was a T-28. And they shot him up, and he had to come in there and belly that thing in, make an emergency landing with no landing gear down, and mangled both his ankles. He broke his ankles, and I think one of them was compound fracture. And he was back in that jungle where it never gets cold, hotter than hell. And they couldn't get him out of there for some reason. I don't know why. But by the time they got him out of there to a doctor, he had gangrene and he died.
Oh, man. What a way to go.
Yep.
That was it an Operation Makasi? Am I remembering that right?
I don't remember. I just
think
heard
it was
about
the Congo operation. Yeah. Toby, you went through a lot of stuff back then, and your friends did as well. Do you think that after all this time that anything else is going to come out about Jerry or about the Hmong situation, anything like that? Or do you think the book has kind of been closed on that now?
I think it's done. I really do. I think there's so many of them people that know what happened that will, like Gar knew a lot of stuff that he took with him, I think it was real selfish of Gar. I mean, he knew a lot of stuff that would have been real history, and he didn't talk about it. He wouldn't talk to Gail Morrison or anybody, and it's a shame, really.
Yeah. Was he just a private man, or did he feel like it was not appropriate to ever, see the light of day?
I think they were all so damned indoctrinated into that crap. I don't know.
Yeah.
Even after some of this stuff is not classified anymore, some of these guys that were lifers still won't talk about it. Like, I can't talk. I said, bullshit. That's 50 years ago. Who gives a shit, Yeah.
I mean, a lot of stuff does get declassified eventually, but it's hard to say what remains.
I think a lot of them like the intrigue and the crap that goes with it, Yeah, I can't talk about that.
Right. Like they already know something, so that's enough for them. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, it's just part of the way they do stuff,
Yep, that's unfortunate. Well, I'm really glad that honestly I've gotten the chance to talk to you, and that Gail got the chance to get a lot of information as well. This is some absolutely fascinating stuff, and people, they want to hear about it and they need to hear about it as well, so it's not forgotten. So I really appreciate you telling me about all this stuff.
You need to get a hold of Pullman and Damon Tabor, both of those guys.
Okay, yeah, I've got Damon's name written down, and let me get Pullman's full name from you after this, and I'm definitely going to look him up. I was already trying to search for him yesterday, and I couldn't find him, within the first few minutes, so I'm going to keep looking.
But I punched in just on YouTube one time several years ago, and it came up and told, he's done several documentaries in Europe and about the Cold War and this and that. So he's well known over there.
Good. Yeah, that's what I love to hear. Honestly, I'm very interested in hearing about that, especially knowing from you that it's the real deal.
Yeah. Well, I kind of suspected it wasn't, but when I checked it out, he checked out the way I looked at it.
Good. Well, Toby, for people that are listening, are there any other good books besides what we've mentioned, or good documentaries, besides the Pullman documentaries that you can recommend to people that want to learn more, after they hear it from you?
I tell you what, there's so many of them that just got so much crap in it that's just not true,
Yeah.
I told Hessel, I think you and I are the only two people that didn't write a damn book. Everybody in the country wrote a book about some of that stuff. And,
Yep.
And a lot of it is kind of like that, the guy I was telling you about that put all that crap out without checking it out,
Oh, Driscoll, I think it was, right?
Yeah, Driscoll. Yeah. God, that's horrible.
That's a shame. But, you got some great memories and you formed those great relationships and some unforgettable experiences, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Some things are they so crazy they sound unbelievable, but they did happen, some of them.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird.
Dang. Well, Toby, this has been a wonderful talk. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to getting this one out in front of everybody who's going to be very eager to hear from you. So I really appreciate your time tonight.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's probably a hell of a lot we didn't cover if you ever want to call back.
No doubt. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to stay in touch with you for sure after this, if that's all right.
Yeah, you betcha, anytime. Anyway, I'm mighty happy up here where I am, me and my dog, and we don't bother nobody, and they don't bother us.
Good. Well, if you don't mind, next time I'm out that way, I would love to look you up.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime.
Okay. All right.
Always got a cold beer.
All right. That sounds wonderful.
All right.
All right. Well, you have a good night. Thank you so much for that.
All right. Take her easy. Bye.
If you're interested in more of Spycraft 101, look for my pages on Instagram at Spycraft 101 and at Cold spy.war.stamps. You can also find more great articles on my website, spycraft101.com. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll stick around because there's lots more to come.
Disclaimer. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The stories and statements expressed herein are experiences and opinions. They may not reflect the views of the host or the production studio. It's okay if you disagree with our content. No piece of media is right for everyone. If you love Spycraft 101, please check us out online, on Instagram, on YouTube, and especially on Patreon. Thank you for listening.